Okay, I am back. As I said, I will be redoing a couple of my past ones that had bad quality and were unwatchable or unhearable. So here I am. I'm going to go back 2 weeks to the first half of Genesis chapter 19, titled Lot's Guests. Lord, I pray that you would give me your message to speak. Help me, Lord, to give exactly what you want me to give, and that everything will go more smoothly this time. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So, starting out, we're going to give a bit of a recap. In chapter 18, we saw that God is just and fair. It says, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? So Abraham was asking God, you're the judge of all the earth. You're just. So shouldn't you do what's right? And so, of course, that logic wouldn't work if God wasn't himself actually indeed righteous and just. Because Satan loves to attack God's justice. Satan likes to convince us that God is holding out on us, that he's mistreating us by disciplining us or by chastising us. But we know that the Lord chastises those whom he loves. If he's not chastising you, you're not one of his children. Like a father will chastise his child, God chastises us. We know that judging the righteous alongside the wicked is wrong, which is a strong argument in favor of a pre-tribulation rapture. The tribulation is going to be God's wrath, his judgment poured out on an unbelieving world. If we're all still here, then we're going to be judged alongside the wicked, alongside those who don't believe. And that's not right, that's wrong. God does not do wrong. Therefore, the righteous must be removed before God's judgment can happen. We see that in the last verse of this chapter. So, first verse, verse 1. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. When Abraham stopped to plead with the Lord, if you find just 50, just 45, just 30, just 10 righteous, will you still destroy them? The other two men that were with him continued on. That's these two angels. And we see that there's a steady progression of compromise in Lot's life. This is from David Guzik. He went from looking toward Sodom, back in Genesis 13, to pitching his tent toward Sodom, to living in Sodom in Genesis 14, and losing everything. Now, Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, indicating he is a civic leader. Now, the gate is where important people sat and judged disputes. They supervised the goings-on in the city, and they discussed how they're going to run the city. It's essentially sort of a city council / judge rolled into one. Excuse me. So Lot was not just a guy in the city. He was fully immersed into the system of the city, fully immersed into the system there. It says that he bowed himself down when he saw these two angels, which means to prostrate oneself before either a superior God or angels. So I have to ask, did he know who he was dealing with? Did he know that these were angels? Or was it just he happened to see two guys and decided he'd run out and bow to them? And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way." And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." But he insisted strongly. So they turned in to him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. So again, did he know with whom he was dealing? Insisting on hospitality. Hey, weary traveler, come, I have an extra room, stay with us, wash your feet, eat, and be on your way in the morning. That was normal for the culture. What was less normal was his insistence that, no, stay with me. I know you say you're going to stay out here, but no, you really should stay with me. Did he know with whom he was dealing? Did he know that by inviting them in, he was going to bless angels? Or did he know what the men of the city might try? It's no surprise. Everybody here probably knows the story quite well. Did he know the level of the wickedness? Because it says he was a righteous man vexed by the iniquities around him. Did he know what these people might try if the angel stayed out in the square? So now, before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house, and they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them carnally." So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly." And these men were wicked from top to bottom, every generation. It's common that as we get older, and I'm 39, so I'm getting there. As we get older, we tend to look back at the generations behind us and say, "Oh, look what they're doing now. Can you believe this? Can you believe the depths that they're sinking to? All these things they're doing, they should know better. This isn't right. This is wrong. This is wicked. This is evil." But every generation that came before us most likely looked at us and said the same thing. Here, they didn't have that problem. There was no, "Oh, this new generation is so wicked." No, all of them, old and young, every quarter. There wasn't the rich who came out. It wasn't the poor who came out. It wasn't the old. It wasn't the young. It was the rich and the poor, the old and the young, all of them. And they were able to all come out like this and be so brazen because their sin was acceptable amongst them. It wasn't something for them to be ashamed of, something for them to say, "Oh, I better be sneaky so nobody knows." No, we're all in this together. If this guy knows, it's okay because he's out here too. And their sin. A lot of people will try to justify what happened, or will try to change things to fit modern interpretations, modern beliefs, modern values, and say that the sin wasn't that they were, looking for homosexual sex with these two angels. It wasn't that their actions, it was what their actions were. Their actions were a violation of hospitality rules. That was the sin according to a lot of people today. That was not their sin. Our culture, our traditions, that's not what God looks at. God's law is not based off of our culture and traditions. And hospitality, the rules of hospitality were a cultural thing. Their sin, we see in Ezekiel. Oh. Here we go. We see their sin in Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50. "Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom." This is God passing judgment on Jerusalem through Ezekiel. "She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw fit. Sodom had many sins. On display here in Genesis 19 is their sexual sin. Because the Lord teaches us, the Bible teaches us, that homosexuality goes against his plan. It goes against the natural order. Therefore, that is indeed a sin. We don't hate homosexual people. We don't hate gay people. We don't hate any of them. We love them because God loves them. I've taught before, I'm fully convinced that there will be homosexual people in heaven. Because there's only one sin that God looks at that keeps you out. That is none of the ones that we want to look at. The only sin that keeps you out of heaven, the only sin that condemns you to hell, is the sin of rejecting Christ. The sin of not accepting the payment he's already made. So while this was a sin, this wasn't their only sin. They also were idle. They were lazy. They were wealthy, which is not a sin. But in their wealth, in their abundance, they had fullness of food. They didn't take care of the poor and the needy among them. And what is the second greatest command that we're given in the Bible? First is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Basically, love the Lord with everything you have within you. Second, and like unto the first, is to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus even says that we are to love our neighbor, love our enemies. I just said neighbors. We're to love our enemies and those who despitefully use you. Because if you love only those who love you, how are you any greater than the heathens? Do not the heathens do this? So we're to love our neighbors. We're to love our enemies, the people that we don't want to love, the people we would love to see go away. We are to love them as well. And that means if we love a person as much as we love ourselves, we see them struggling, we see them hungry, we see them in need, and we want to do what we can to help them. And we do what we can to help them. If we look at America today, we are, if not the richest nation, we are near the top of the richest nations in the world. Yet we have a huge homeless problem. We have homeless people with mental illness, homeless people who just fell on some bad luck, homeless veterans. We have people who are dying for lack of food in our country. And we fight to avoid having to provide for them. We can disagree as to whether the government should do it or whether we should do it, but somebody needs to do it. Somebody needs to help out these people. So if your thought when you see somebody in need on the side of the road is, well, they probably earned it. Oh, well, if I give them money, they're just going to probably spend it on booze. You're falling into the same sin. When I feel compelled to give to somebody, I don't worry what they're going to spend that money on. I worry that God told me to give, and so I'm going to give. Now Lot pleads with them to turn away. He thinks that he has some kind of a say, some sway, some influence on the people because of the fact that he sits in the gate. He's well respected. He's a part of their system. He pleads with them to turn away. And we see a difference here also. Abraham interceded for them. Lot here is pleading with them. We need people who will do both. We need people who will intercede. We need those prayer warriors who are going to be out there just praying for people, praying for their salvation, praying that they would come to know the Lord, interceding on their behalf as Abraham did. We also need people who will be pleading with those people. We need people who will be out there talking to people, sharing the gospel, sharing the word, not just praying. Both sides are highly important. Both sides are part of God's work, part of God's plan. We need both. And Lot said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." And they said, "Stand back." Then they said, "This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." And so they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. These men were fully committed to their sin. David Guzik writes, "Perhaps Lot thought that through compromise he might reach these men, but just the opposite happened. They had no respect for him whatsoever, even though his friendly first approach led him to call such wicked men my brethren." The Bible has strong words to say about who you call brethren. But Lot was compromised. We already know this from his progression closer and closer to this wicked people. Most likely he thought like a lot of the people in the church today think, a lot of Christians today think, I need to become a part of this. I need to get into the system so that I can change it from the inside. We need to get Christian leaders. We need to get Christians doing all the stuff in government. And all that would be great. That's exactly what Lot tried. Lot was a righteous man. And he most likely believed that if he could get into the system, if he could get in there and try to lead from the inside, that he could make a difference. But we know he didn't make a difference. Abraham taught God all the way down to just 10 righteous men in the city, 10. And God wouldn't destroy the city. He did not find 10. Lot's weak testimony meant that few, if any, of his family and none of his friends knew God. When we compromise with the world, we weaken our testimony. When we try to do things through our power, through the power of the world, that doesn't bring about God's power. We can't compromise. If we want to see a difference made in this world, how do we make that difference? We make that difference by making the difference in individual people. We need to share our testimony, share the gospel, bring people to know the Lord. Let them come to know God, and that'll make all the difference. They may not be people in leadership, they may not make a huge difference on the world, but it's going to make all the difference on their world. We want to make sure that we are out there pleading with people directly. We can't legislate morality. It's not going to happen. Especially we knowing that we're getting closer and closer to the end. As we get closer to the end, the world's going to get more and more wicked. We can't legislate morality. We can't turn our laws into Christian laws because it's not going to work. All we can do is talk to the people. We can witness to people. The more people that come to know the Lord, the more people are going to make it into heaven. And if we can have a great revival in this nation to where we get everybody knowing the Lord, guess what's going to happen? All the morality that we've tried to legislate, it's going to happen naturally. Because when God gets a hold of somebody, then he turns their hearts. He changes them in the ways they need to be changed. The laws can't do that. God's law couldn't make us holy, couldn't make us righteous. God's law points us to the fact that we aren't holy, the fact that we aren't righteous. So how do we think that getting involved and trying to change man's laws is going to make us holy and righteous? So now Lot offers his daughters to these people. And a lot of people have pointed this out and have said, That's terrible. See, the Bible is misogynist. The Bible hates women because it's putting that in there, and this is supposed to be the good guy. Not everything we see in the Bible is an example of what to do. Sometimes it's an example of what not to do. Sometimes it's just showing us what actually happened. And it's an example in this case of Lot's compromise, of his failure as a husband and as a father at times. And that's not a condemnation of Lot, because I'm in no position to condemn. I falter, I screw up all the time. I've never done this. But it's an example of what did happen and that it was wrong. This isn't the Bible justifying Lot, saying that he did the right thing here. Pastor Chuck wrote, but here, Lot. And again, I believe that secondly, it shows that even Lot himself and his own morals, in his own values, had been corrupted by his living in Sodom. I do not see how you can live in the midst of such corruption and it not have some influence upon you. His morals, his values, his culture said that the guest is to be protected above all else, that you have a duty to protect your guests. And in this case, that meant he was willing to sacrifice his daughters to protect his guests. Our duty, first and foremost, is to God. Not to our cultures, not our values, our morals, but to God and his values, his morals. And it's a caution for us to look at. Right, Lot, who was called a righteous man, who was vexed by the iniquities around him, was still tainted by those iniquities. He was still corrupted to a degree. And it shows us the depravity of the people of Sodom. Here Lot offered what to any worldly man would be like the Holy Grail. A woman who is not yet known a man. That's what men go for in the world. And they rejected that to go for the men instead. The ones who were A, the most wrong, and B, the ones that they weren't allowed to have, the forbidden. They didn't want to do the right thing, which, again, Lot offering his daughters was not the right thing. Them accepting his daughters would not have been the right thing. What they wanted was what was forbidden. The thing that went as much against God as possible. And what it shows us, as they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to breaking down the door, it shows us we can strive to build up our example in the world, build up our reputation, our status, our standing. But if we're standing in God, A, our standing in the world doesn't matter. But B, the second we take a stand against the world, the second we take a stand for God, even in Lot's screwed up way here, how quickly did his standing fall away from him? He was a respected member, and now they're mocking him. Now they're threatening him, talking about doing to him worse than they're going to do to the two men that they wanted. Pressing against him so hard they're about to break the door down. He tried to work within the system, he tried to legislate morality, and we see that they had no respect for him in the long run. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. First, these are some strong guys, these angels. The entire city was pressing against Lot, almost breaking the door down. They pushed the door open, pulled Lot in against the mob, and then reshut it again and kept the mob from being able to get in. If Lot didn't know with whom he was dealing before, he might have got his first clue now. But on top of that, they struck everyone blind. That's another example of a supernatural strength, of a power that doesn't come from us. These men, if there's any doubt as to who they are, now it should be pretty clear. And it shows us, again, the depravity of the people of Sodom. How committed they were to their sin, to their wickedness. They're struck blind. If I'm attempting to do something that I think is great, and somebody strikes me blind, that now becomes my new priority. All of a sudden I can't see it, and I got to figure out what just happened. How do I get my sight back? These men, not so. They were struck blind and persisted in their pursuit of sin until they were weary from trying to find the door. Like, to be just wandering around in the square trying to find a door to the point that you're weary from it. They kept at this for quite a while. They put a lot of energy into trying to complete their sin, even after being struck blind. When we look around at the world, we know that this is still true. If you share with somebody the word, if you share the truth, a lot of times they resist it, they fight it, they turn around and try and find every excuse, every reason why they should stick to their sin rather than going with God. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? A son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So right there, just in case there's a confusion as to whether or not these are angels or the Lord himself, they had said the Lord has sent them. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed." So we don't really know how many sons and daughters Lot really had. We just know that he had 2 daughters who had never been touched by man. And he had 2 sons-in-law, or had some sons-in-law. So likely he had other daughters as well. Or these 2 sons-in-law may have just been betrothed to his daughters. But in any case, we know he had at least 2 daughters and at least 2 sons-in-law. Only the 2 daughters and his wife made it out with him. When he went and warned his sons-in-law, what did they do? They laughed. They thought it was a joke. Because Lot didn't have that witness before them, that strength of testimony before them, to where they knew that he was a righteous man, and that if he comes and he says that the sin is great here and the Lord is going to destroy it, we need to leave. You need to leave. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 11 through 15. "For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear. For the day will declare it, because it will be revealed, by fire, and the fire will test each one's work, of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet as through fire. Lot was saved, even though he was compromised. You can be compromised and still be saved. You can have essentially fire insurance. I'm saved, but I'm not telling anybody else about it. But in that scenario, you don't have any enduring works. You'll have no reward. The foundation which is laid is Jesus Christ. So that's your salvation. Build on that foundation. Build on it. If you build on it with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, you're going to build on that foundation. But only some of those materials will last through the fire. If you want to build on the foundation with gold or with silver and precious stones, things that will withstand the test of time, things that will live through the fire, how do we do that? We do that by living righteously, by doing what we're supposed to do. We do that by witnessing to people. We do that by living as uprightly as we can. We want our witness to be strong before the world. We want people, when we come and tell them of the Lord, for them to believe us, for them to look at us and want to know why we are able to withstand the trials and the problems of life and maintain our joy and maintain our peace. If we build on that foundation with straw, because every bad thing that happens, we freak out and we get scared and we're crying and we have no peace, we're always stressed, that's not going to be an enduring work. If we build on that with hay, because we don't tell anybody about anything, that's not going to last. The only thing that lasts, the only thing that we can bring with us into heaven, the only work that counts, is when we bring other people with us, when we have that strong witness, that strong testimony that brings other people to know God. And that's what we need to strive for. Lot lived a compromised life. His testimony, when he told people of the coming judgment, it didn't save anyone. It didn't save the people around him. He lived in the city for at least 10, 15, 20 years and had no impact whatsoever. There wasn't even 10 righteous people in the city. But we see that God rescues his people from judgment. Abraham interceded and got God to agree to not destroy the city if there was but 10 righteous. God even agreed if there was 50 righteous. So if there had been righteous people in that city, God would not have destroyed the city, because he's not going to destroy his people. When Lot hesitated, when Lot lingered and his family lingered, the angels physically dragged Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters out of the city. When we get called to leave our old life behind, it's hard, because you would live in that life your entire life, and you're attached to it. But when God says to you, it's time to leave that behind and we need to move forwards in righteousness and justice, we can be attached to the world, and we can kind of drag our feet coming to know him and building our relationship with him. We need to make sure we do not become too attached to this world. We need to be ready to move and to go when he says. And we get a picture of the rapture here, because when the rapture happens, I believe it's going to be pre-tribulation, and therefore God's going to pull us out before the wrath comes, just like he just did with Lot. Luke 17, 28 through 31, Jesus speaks. He says, likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, and they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. When the day comes, and when Jesus calls us out, let's be quick. No lingering. Don't try and save your stuff. When Jesus calls you, you go. 2 Peter 2, 6 and 9 tells us, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment. Judgment couldn't come until the righteous was removed. Judgment won't come until the righteous are removed. Then Lot said to them, please know, my lords, excuse me, indeed now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said to him, see, I have favored you concerning this thing also, and that will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. God's commands can be scary at times. Lot was frightened to run to the mountains, which I think is kind of funny. Here he is. He was in the city. God pulled him out so he wouldn't be killed. And now he's afraid that God won't protect him if he runs to the mountains where he was just told to run to. But when he came to them, and he came knowing what was going on, it was really kind of a bold thing anyways to do, to request to go to the city. Because the whole plain, all the cities there were going to be destroyed. And then he's asked, can I go to this city and be safe there? And they agreed. If God's been good to you, don't be afraid to ask for even more mercy and grace. You can't exhaust his goodness. He's not going to suddenly run out, but, oh, sorry, I'm all out today. Come back tomorrow. God's goodness and his mercy and his grace are infinite. And you never know. The city of Zoar was to be destroyed. But because of Lot's plea, the city was saved. If he had been too frightened to ask for that mercy, that whole city would have been destroyed along with the rest. The plains, there was some 50 to 80,000 people that lived in those cities that estimated that were destroyed. But because of Lot's plea, the city of Zoar was saved. But now, giving you the flip side again, the city of Zoar. Zoar means insignificant. It was little. That's why Lot chose it. If Lot had been so passionate in his pleading with the people and his witness to the people as he was with his pleading with these angels to allow him to go to the city instead of the mountains, if he had lived the way he is called to live in the cities, perhaps instead of saving an insignificant city, a small city, he might have been able to have 10 righteous people in Sodom, 50 righteous or more, and saved all of those people. God can use us when we're compromised. God can use us even better. God can accomplish even more through us when we're fully his. when we're fully committed to His work, committed to His will, and not so much worried about ourselves or our lives, what's around us to the world, God can really use us. So that's really what I pulled out of this portion of Scripture is, people will say, hey, I don't care as long as I make it into heaven. Even if I make it into my eyebrows are smoking, that's good enough. And you know what? Yeah, the end goal is heaven. I want to make sure that I am saved, that I live up to God's call, that I make it into heaven. Because if you're saved, if you have your salvation, you are saved, you will be in heaven. But I don't want to stop there, I have friends that I love, friends that aren't saved, friends that aren't going to be in heaven. And you know where they're going to be if they're not going to be in heaven. I don't want that. I don't want to get there all by my lonesome. Like, I made it, God. Because I want them to make it too. And so what this passage calls out to us, don't compromise. Don't try to balance the world with God. If the world is on the scale, it's even on the scale with God. God needs to be the main thing. The world shouldn't even compete with God in our lives and our hearts. We want to make sure that when we deal with people, that they see God in us and that they aren't turned away from God because of us. So that's what we have. Don't compromise. Lord, I pray that you would be with the people that are watching, that you would have your hand on us, Lord, that you protect us as we go out into the world, protect us from the corrupting influence of the world, that we wouldn't compromise, that we wouldn't go halfway in our faith and our belief, that would be wholly committed to you, Lord, and that we draw people to come to know you through that commitment, through our uprightness, through our love, through our peace and our joy, that people would see you and that they would want to know more. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.